Namaste, beloveds. I'm so thrilled that we're having yet another global gathering only a week after the last one. And I was so blown away last time by everyone's participation and their willingness to share what's coming up for them. And it allowed me the freedom to be able to design process work specifically for the people who were online with me that would help liberate us and heal us and bring us to a place of clarity and a sense of purpose as we're moving into this time of post-lockdown where we're emerging from lockdown. And it's an interesting thing because on my own personal Facebook page, which is different from the fan page, people have been sharing there's different kinds of fears that we are now facing. Somehow in lockdown, even though we were kind of trapped and frozen and we didn't know what the future was going to bring, at least we knew that had to stay home and that we had to make do with what was happening. But now, as different countries and states are beginning to emerge from lockdown, it's like, oh my God, we're going out into the world out there, and it feels very uncertain. It's as if nothing is certain anymore. We don't know if we're going to be facing a second wave of the coronavirus, if it's safe to even go back to the workplace. We're feeling, a little bit of trepidation around even going and exercising. And in some parts of the country, let's say you're in Britain, well, in England, you're allowed to go to the beach, but in Wales and Scotland, you're not. And so that gives a mixed message to everyone. Is it safe? Is it not safe? And then I am reading some of what people are sharing. One woman has cancer, and yet we're emerging from lockdown in the country, at least that she's in. And of course, she's vulnerable. And yet it's a time where she's expected to begin going back to work and going to restaurants and going out in public. And it's bringing up all kinds of different fears. One woman was sharing on my Facebook page that she was afraid that the lockdown hadn't been long enough, and that somehow we would go back to unconscious ways and people wouldn't be careful and alert and careful of coughing on others and careful of space and social distancing. And so she was afraid that would, who knows what would come from that if people had let down their guard and stopped being really alert and careful. And so each of us are facing a different set of fears. And I just wanted to encourage you, as you're coming online right now, to write down some of what's been coming up for you. Last week, I was working with the beliefs that were holding us back and really opening us into a new consciousness of trust and feeling guided by trust. That's a whole different consciousness than what's showing up this week, where in fact people are facing, starting tomorrow on Monday, that things are really starting to open up. And it's almost like there's a sense of foreboding happening. And so it's a very different consciousness that's showing up here. And I want to design this program for all of us to do some clearing work so we come to a place of wholeness and peace and can be guided by the wordless presence of our own heart, by our own soul, in a healthy way as we emerge from lockdown. But for that to take place, we have to be willing to face and meet our worst fears that are arising right now. And so I'm welcoming you to just type in, what are some of the specific fears that are coming up for you right now? And while you're writing them in, there's a number of you who are brand new to the journey, have no idea why you're on this invitation to a global gathering. And just for those of you who are new to the journey, my name is Brandon Bays, and originally, over now 27 years ago, I was diagnosed with a basketball-sized tumor, and part of the gift of my own healing journey, and I healed in only 6.5 weeks' time without drugs or surgery, is I found a method for all of us in a very practical way to go on a journey inside of ourselves and to get access to something that is called cell memories. And what is known about our emotions and the cells in the body, they have a biochemical effect, so that when you feel a strong emotion and you repress it, it releases a quantifiable biochemistry that will go to certain cell receptors and block them. And it renders those cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, it happens in the area where the cells are blocked. And conversely, what is also known to be true is that when we feel our emotions very naturally and openly like a child, our cell receptors remain open. And so right now I work with medical doctors and with hospitals and with psychiatrists and obviously with people from all walks of life, because this is a very practical, down to earth process that you can undergo in your life to literally get access, to go on a journey inside the body, get access to these blocked cells, go through a very deep process of release and letting go and understanding what's happened to you in your life, and forgiveness, so that you're releasing all the stored consciousness in the cells, so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness as new regenerative cells. And so it helps you get to the emotional root cause of what is causing our surface issues. It helps you get to the emotional corollary to what is co-created illness. So more important than any time in history, these tools are needing to be made available to everybody. And I'm so grateful for 26 years, even though we've been streaming online since 2011 with various programs, I'm so grateful that for the first time in 26 years, I'm going to be giving the Journey Intensive, a 2-day immersion in this liberating, profoundly healing work that has, well, millions of people have undergone it. Hundreds of thousands have actually been to the events and have found how liberating and profoundly healing it is. I'm going to be giving that come mid-June. But we're not at mid-June. In mid-June, I'm going to be giving, for the first time ever, I've always done the Journey Intensive live and in person, but because of these times where we're not able to meet in person, we're not able to get together in groups and work with that way, I was really stretched to have to create as powerful an event. And I'm very proud of it, actually. I feel that it's lost none of the power, none of the presence that all of us commonly feel when we come together in the work. And it's a 2-day immersion that you're going to not only learn the skills and go through liberating process work where you will process with other people, and actually on Zoom, you'll be able to be supported by journey practitioners who've been undergoing this work and experiencing it for many, many years. And so you'll be having this huge embrace of support where I'll be teaching you, taking you through some of the process work. And then when it comes time to literally pair up and partner with somebody, you'll be getting a chance to do that on Zoom with the support of the trainers and a co-presenter. So it's an amazing, amazing event. I'm so glad that we're going to have that coming up so that people could really use this work. And I wish I could give this work in an hour's time, but I can't. So I'm going to be doing what I can. What can we do now between now and in mid-June? And we're going to be giving it first in Europe in mid-June, and the next week after that in the United States. So we're on that time zone because it goes from 9 until 6:30 at night. And it's a deep immersion for Saturday and Sunday. And then in Australia, again at the end of June, we're going to be giving it from 9 until 6:30. And so, but we are not there yet. And so I'm wanting to give you as much healing work, liberating work to address the actual issues that we're going through right now. It is my prayer that we emerge from this chrysalis that we've all been in, this cocoon that we've been in lockdown. I mean, Gabby and I have been here from yesterday, 10 weeks in lockdown. So it's been a long time. And as a result of having been in lockdown a long time, Greece has been in incredible, has incredible reports. You know, there's only been 167 deaths here, you know, because they had police enforced lockdowns. So we've been blessed with that, but we're just emerging and people are feeling very cautious, very scared about what's going to happen, you know, since we've kept it so safe here. So I hope that I've talked enough to give you a chance to write down some of the concerns that you've been having. So I'd like to make a bespoke process for all of us that can address the concerns that have been coming up for you, the fears that are coming up, the anxiety, and you know, what are the specific fears that you've got coming up for you? So I have Gabby, who's the managing director of The Journey. She's sitting here next to me and she's reading whatever anyone's posting. And so, Gabby, if you'd be really...
I'm just going to read some of the comments. The first one was over 60s restrictions, even for us healthy and useful 60 pluses. Absolutely agree with that. Fear of lack of trust in the authorities.
Yes.
Huge fear for the planet, that people will go back to their old ways and not value the planet. Loss of a loved one who may get COVID-19, doing my best to trust the divine order to unfold and support me and my beloved and my loved ones. Fear that we will forget the lessons learned during the quiet time.
Yeah.
To keep my mask and gloves on when going out. How do we know if we will be safe from others? Careless people, when I'm outside, getting angry and afraid to show it because they may start spitting at me.
Right.
Need a method to, cancer, sorry, I don't understand it. I love to be friendly, but I am afraid of coming into face-to-face contact with people again in case they have the virus. Afraid that the government forces us to have vaccine when it becomes ready. Doubt that the gains will be lost again. Others with their fears in your own family. Fear corruption and compulsory vaccination again and control. Fear of keeping safe in these tough times.
Yeah. It's a whole different set of fears arising right now that are specific to us emerging now. And I wanted to share with you what happened to me and meeting what was almost out of control fear for me, and a process. I'd like to welcome you to undergo this process. If you'd like, you can get a pen and a piece of paper right now, or I can just do it with you. I will do it with you, and you can just close your eyes and undergo it. Or you can keep your eyes open and have a piece of paper where you can write down some of these fears and how they've made you feel. And I just want to share with you, I spontaneously uncovered a process that really helped me get to the bottom of my fears and open into a huge divine presence of stillness, of peace inside. And from there, I was able to find a way. Well, I really asked myself the question, if I clear this worst fear using the journey method, you know, doing a journey process, what's the best that can happen? And a whole vision for a way forward that was very healthy, very grounded, and very practical emerged for me. And the more I wrote that, the more confident I became. And so what I'm going to do is, following this particular session that we're going to undergo live, I'm going to have our tech team include the worksheets so that you can undergo it a second time and in depth. So it'll be a link that's connected to this site, as you know, so that you can then download the worksheets and actually go through this process. Now, ideally, in going through this process, the highest result that you could have would be to undergo a journey process, a full-on emotional journey process to process your fear. But we can't do that online. It would take too much time and needs to be done in a one-to-one way. So if you are already a journey grad and have been through the journey intensive, let's use this session to get to the worst fear that we have, to open into this that I call source, to create a vision to move forward healthily. And then you go to our website and download the journey book, the original journey book, and ask for also to download an emotional journey process. And you can do that. It's free of charge. As a matter of fact, that's free of charge for everybody watching this. If you go to www.thejourney.com, we will give you a downloadable free book so that you can not only go through the story, but you can get access to a couple of processes from the back of that book that is a separate download. So I really want to support everybody in the highest and best way, not to just talk about fears, but to fully be free from them, to come to a place of peace and clarity in yourself, and to create a vision, a purposeful, a practical way forward for all of you. So I hope by now you've had a chance to grab a piece of paper if you'd like, and a pen. And also, I'd like to just share with you where this process originally emerged from. For those of you that are familiar with the journey, you'll know that healing, back in 1992, when I first got the tumor, that was the first of many disasters that happened. And following healing from the tumor, a year later, I'd moved from New York. I'm a New Yorker, and I'd moved from New York to Malibu, California, and I had a little tiny beach shack on the sand in Malibu, and they had those big mega fires, the wildfires, and ours was the sole and only home that went down on the beach. And so we were completely financially devastated. We didn't have any insurance. Even our cars exploded, and we were financially wiped out, as many people are right now during this coronavirus crisis. And it was really a year after that of cobbling our life back together. And we found a 2-bedroom apartment south of all the disaster in Malibu and started to cobble our lives back together again. And I can remember having to get a mattress from a friend of mine who had a mattress in their garage because we were so financially wiped out. I was having just to ask for help from wherever I could get it, and just to really put a roof over our heads and cobble our lives back together again. But we did cobble our lives back together again. And a year after, there we were in that 2-bedroom apartment, and my husband of 20 years, who I believed at that time to be the great love of my life, who I felt we had almost like a legendary romance, he shared with me that he had fallen in love with a much younger woman, and he had spoken to her about marriage already. And I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. And it was quite a painful and devastating year as I watched the whole of my life be deconstructed. And during that following year, I lost my job. My husband, we couldn't afford a lawyer, so we got an arbitrator to arbitrate what was a very modest divorce settlement. That even though we'd been together for now 21 years, I didn't ask for everything and half of everything that we had amassed together. I asked solely that for the next 2 years that he would give me a modest spousal support payment, because much of my life had been devoted to serving him in his career. And I was also a presenter of the Living Health Seminar for Tony Robbins. And so I was presenting that and also was serving that whole organization. And my own private practice as a therapist was the least of what was my livelihood. And so I knew I needed at the age of 41 years old, I needed at least 2 years of a modest spousal support payment every month to help me get my life back on track and to start my own personal career. And so it was a year after my husband had, told me that he'd fallen in love with another woman and the divorce had come through, and only one spousal support check had come through for me. And out of nowhere, the next check was due in about a week's time. And I was vacuuming the carpet in my living room. Out of nowhere, all this fear came rising up. And it didn't have any story attached to it. But all this fear just came out of nowhere. And I didn't know this. But I think, like many of you, I think all of us actually have fear of feeling fear. I had fear of feeling fear. And suddenly I was flying in emotion. I was cleaning the house, calling up clients, filling up my schedule, being with friends, watching films with friends. And I was keeping myself occupied. I was in motion. I was on the run from fear. And so, very busy week the next week. And there I am vacuuming a week later. And once again, and when I say fear was coming up, it was more like a panic attack. And I'd never had that happen to me. I mean, I'd nearly lost my life with a tumor. I'd had a house burned down. I had the great love of my life leave me for a much younger woman. And I'd never had this, out of control fear arise. And that even flew me into motion even more. And it was a week after that, I was vacuuming again. You might probably think I'm really OCD, but I'm not. It's just that I was on the run from fear. And I looked at the carpet that I was vacuuming, and again, this full on fear, almost terror came up for me. And I pressed the button on the vacuum cleaner, and I looked at the carpet that I was vacuuming, and I thought, this is nuts. I vacuumed this carpet yesterday, and I haven't even sat on the sofa since yesterday. There can't be any dirt on this carpet. And I stopped and sat down on the sofa, and I said, Brandon, what is it you're so afraid of? And I got to stop. And obviously I recognized that I'd put myself into constant motion and activity to avoid feeling the fear. And I think that's been happening a lot with a lot of us, because we all have fear. No matter what our fears are, we all have fear of feeling fear. And so I closed my eyes and I said, Brandon, what are you so afraid of? And up came the fear and a picture of the spousal support check, but it not coming in. And I thought, this is nuts. I've had a tumor. I've had a house burned down. I've lost my livelihood. I've lost my job. I've lost my marriage. And I never had this kind of out of control fear. And now a spousal support check isn't coming in, and I'm afraid of that. And I thought, surely that can't be the real fear. And I wondered to myself if the surface fear was simply that. And I wondered if there were even deeper fears beneath that surface fear. And I thought, I'm going to scrape the bottom of the barrel with this fear. I'm going to find out if that is really my core fear. And so I closed my eyes again, and I had put at the top of a page, which you can do right now if you'd like to, and you can put at the top of that page, just write, during these uncertain times, what are my worst fears? What are my worst fears? So you can write that. During these uncertain times, what are my worst fears? Just put that at the top of the page. Okay, so here's what happened. I closed my eyes and I said, okay, what is my worst fear here? And again, this picture of the spousal support check not coming in arises for me. And I said, okay, well, let's say that happens. What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? The spousal support check doesn't come in. And immediately I made a picture. And it was a picture that after about a month's time, I would run out of money and I wouldn't be able to pay my rent. And that my landlord, who I knew cared about me, he was very fond of me, he was going to have to chuck me out of there. And when I saw this picture, what's the worst that could happen is my landlord is going to chuck me out of the apartment because I can't pay the rent. All this panic and fear came up, and also shame and humiliation at the age of 41 years old. And with all my degrees, my education, all my accreditations, all my life experience, all the jobs I've had, that my landlord would have to throw me out on the streets. And so I wrote down, what's the worst that could happen? And well, my landlord chucks me out. So I wrote down the picture that I made. And then I wrote on the other side, well, what does that make me feel? And it was a feeling of just out and out panic, shame, humiliation. And it really came roaring up. So I wrote at the top of the page there, how does it make me feel? So on one side, what's the worst that could happen? On the other side of the page, how does that make me feel? So then I asked, and my eyes are closed, well, let's say that happened, that your landlord chucks you out of the house, out of the apartment. What's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen is, and I made an immediate picture of going to my mother's house in New York. And immediately, I put a cross through that picture. There's just no way I'm going to be a parasite to my mother and go live with my mother at the age of 41 years old, where I ought to be taking care of her. And so I crossed out the picture, and I made a picture of going to go stay with my best friend there, who was in LA. And we have a saying in the United States that you wear out your welcome. And I knew that after about 2 weeks' time, that my friend, she, in the kindest of ways, would start to nudge me out of that apartment that she had. And so the picture I made was staying with my friend. But the emotion that it brought up when she was nudging me out of the apartment was a feeling of devastation and betrayal. And again, fear, what next? What now? So I wrote down the picture on a piece of paper. My friend chucks me out. On the other side, on the right side of the page, I wrote, what's the feeling? It was a feeling of devastation, betrayal, abandonment. It just that my own best friend would chuck me out. And then I closed my eyes again. And I said, okay, let's say that happens. That your best friend, in the kindest of all possible ways, starts to nudge you out of the house. What's the worst that could happen? And well, I found myself in my hometown on the streets of New York City with a cup in my hand, looking for quarters so that I could feed myself. And I thought, this is nuts. If your best friend throws you out, your deepest fear here is that you're going to end up a beggar on the streets of New York with all your education, all your diplomas, all your certifications in so many different fields. You're going to end up as a beggar. And that was my rock bottom fear. I said, well, what is the real fear that's here? Not the surface fear about a check not coming in. That was a surface fear. The rock bottom fear was that intrinsically, I did not have what it takes to survive. That somehow I didn't come in with the goods. I did not have what it takes to survive. And I circled that worst fear. And I thought, okay, that is the rock bottom fear. And I'd scraped the bottom of the barrel, and I had actually met my rock bottom fear. And I said, well, if that's true, that I intrinsically don't have what it takes to survive, how does that make me feel? And something inside of me just let go. Well, if I haven't got what it takes to survive, I would die. At least the physical form would die. And what's the worst that could happen? I could die. And something inside of me just let go. And my body began to dissolve. And I fell into a vast field of nothingness. And very shortly after I let go in the nothingness, the whole room flooded with light, with peace, with presence. And there was the direct recognition that even though my body dies, there is something that does not die, that is who I am, that is my essence. And this presence was pervading all of existence. And I opened my eyes and I looked at that circled worst fear, my certain belief that I did not have what it takes to survive. And I thought, well, let's say I use a journey process and I completely clear that out, which is what a journey process does. It clears it out at a cellular level. It helps you uncover where that fear and when it came in and go through a radical process of clearing. And I said, okay, well, let's say I do a journey process. I clear my rock bottom, my bottom of the barrel, my worst fear. What's the best that could happen? So I turned the page over and I wrote at the top, if I clear my worst fear, what is the best that could happen? And I just innocently started writing like I was a scribe for grace. It was like a download. Well, if I clear the worst fear, the best that could happen is I get real. And that I realize that that spousal support check is not coming in again. And indeed, it never did come in again. And that you get yourself to the meditation center that you love to go to there in Santa Monica. And you see if you can find a housemate who could, take the second bedroom. And I said, okay, if that happened, then what's the best that could happen? Well, that would buy me the time so that I would no longer be kicked out of my apartment, because it would split my bills immediately in half. And it would buy me the time I need to get myself back on my own 2 feet. And I said, well, if that happened, then what would happen? Well, I would find the courage to finally share with all the people that I know in the who are my deep friends, my dear friends of having been in the seminar industry all this time, that I had not been sharing with anyone, that I had developed this work that I now call the journey, which was born from my own direct living experience from healing from that basketball-sized tumor, and that it was extremely liberating and profoundly healing work. And so that the best that could happen is that I call up my best friends and I let them know that this work has emerged from my own healing experience, and that I share with them not only this work, but that I could do a journey workshop in their homes. And I said, okay, well, let's say that happens. Then what's the best that could happen? And The best that could happen is that they actually put on the events. Well, if that happened, then what would happen? Well, then all these people, hundreds, hopefully thousands of people around the world, would start getting that they can participate in their own healing journey, and they can do this liberating, life-changing work, and heal themselves and heal their lives. And if that happened, then what would happen? Well, the seminars would start getting bigger. And if that happened, then what would happen? Well, books would get written. If that happened, then what would happen? And then there'll be television shows, radio shows, magazine articles. If that happened, then what would happen? Well, the work would become like a fire and travel around the world, so that people would get this profoundly liberating and healing work to be able to use in their own homes. If that happened, then what would happen? There would be a whole wave of healing and awakening sweeping our globe. And I looked at all the possibility, the vision of what is the best that could happen if I faced down my worst fear and used a journey process to face and clear it. And I thought, does that give me the leverage I need on myself, the motivation, the inspiration to want to face down that worst fear? Yeah, damn right it does. And so I did a journey process that day, got to the rock bottom of that fear, cleared it out. And guess what happened? Everything I wrote down on that page of what is the best that could happen started happening. The next day, I went to the meditation center. I ended up finding a roommate, split the bills in half. The day after that, I started calling my friends in the seminar business. Within a month's time, I had at least 2 journey seminars every month for the next 6 months. Then it started to beginning to grow, and I started to travel to Britain. And it started to go on fire there. And there was an article that was written in the Sunday Times, a 2-page article about a woman who healed using the journey, going to a journey intensive. And it just, boom, it ballooned overnight. We had 2,500 calls that first week, and I had to give a journey intensive every week for the next 6 weeks in a row to take care of all the people that were going. And then suddenly a book got written, and then it started to travel around the world, and I was invited to all the British and Commonwealth countries, in South Africa and Australia, New Zealand, and to China, to India, and to America, and to Canada, and so the English-speaking countries. And then after that, it started going into all the international countries. And right now, here we are, 26 years later, 27 years later, since I did that process. And it's now, we give the journey seminars in 39 countries. It's translated in 24 languages. All because I was willing to face down and clear my worst fear. So I'd like to give you this process for you to do, and I will guide you through it. And you can do this process without writing anything down, or you can do it with writing it down. And then after you go through this session, you can then get the worksheets and download them online to actually do this process a second time. But I won't be taking you through it. You'll be taking yourself through it. And then you can also get onto thejourney.com. You can join our website. You can get a free access to the book. You can become a subscriber so that you can get the journey work. And then, of course, come mid-June, when it's time for you to really learn how to do this work, you can start undergoing the journey intensive, where you can roll up your sleeves and really dive into this immensely liberating work. I mean, right now, for instance, I'm working with 2 hospitals in Tel Aviv. And they have a cancer unit in one and a heart unit in another. And after you've undergone your operation, you go through a week recovery center where you undergo the journey work to get to the emotional corollary of the physical illness. And, those of you asking about the, COVID and the virus, of course you ought to be undergoing the physical journey work. That's work that you will get in the journey intensive. So for now, once you're ready, if you've got a piece of paper and a pen with you, you can keep your eyes open for this. If you don't have a piece of paper and pen with you, then what I'd like to suggest is you just take a nice deep breath in. Let's all of us right now take a nice deep breath in, letting it out, and you can close your eyes. Now, whether your eyes are open or eyes closed, I'd like to ask you to just speak out loud into your room some of the fears that have been coming up for you lately, just popping up out of nowhere. It has to be done out loud. I've explained this before in previous workshops that I've given online, that there's something called the power of the spoken word. And it's, you've heard the expression better out than in. And when you actually speak it out loud, it's like it gets out of your body. It's no longer just milling around in your mind and in your body. So go ahead, and I'm just going to ask you some questions. And just right now, on the count of 3, just speak out loud some of the big fears coming up, the little fears coming up. 1, 2, 3. What are some niggling fears that have been coming up? I mean, we shared some earlier. What are some bigger fears coming up? Just speak out loud. All the fears, little ones, big ones, just speak them out loud. And now, among all those fears that we're all having during this uncertain time, for those of you that have the piece of paper in front of you, it says at the top, during these uncertain times, what are the worst fears? Go ahead and write them down now. And then those of you who've been speaking it out loud and just doing that, what's the worst fear? Among all the fears, the niggly little ones, the bigger ones, what's the worst fear that came up for you? And whether you're writing it down or whether you're just with your eyes closed, speak it out loud right now. Speak it out loud right now. For those of you writing, put at the top of the page underneath the fears, what is the worst that could happen? Draw a line down the page. How does that make me feel? Okay, so everyone together once again, speak your worst fear out loud. What is the worst fear that's arising for you? And now ask yourself the question, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? And let a picture arise in your awareness. What is the worst that could happen? And you can write that down. And now open with that and ask, how does that make me feel? What are the feelings, the emotions coming up? Write that down. And now asking, well, if that happened, let's say that worst thing happened. If that happened, what is the worst that could happen? Speak it out loud into your room. Make a picture. What is the worst that could happen? Or write it down. What is the worst that could happen? Really open with that. How does it make you feel emotionally? Write it down or speak it out. And now asking, well, if that happened, what is the worst that could happen? What is the worst that could happen? And let that picture of the worst that could happen arise in your awareness. And speak it out loud. Write it down. How does it make you feel emotionally as you open with that picture? How does it make you feel emotionally? And if that happened, what is the worst that could happen? What is your rock bottom fear? I mean, the absolute worst. What is the scraping the bottom of the barrel worst fear? The worst that could happen? Speak it out loud. And as you open with that, how does it make you feel? Write it down. And now, if you're at the rock bottom fear, the worst that could happen basically is death, non-existence. Just let that sort of melting into the nothingness happen. Just let yourself surrender. When the worst that has happened has happened, what remains? Just feeling yourself dissolving and opening. And when you've really opened into your worst fear, that rock bottom fear, and you let go and just surrender, feeling yourself expanding, dissolving, melting into a vast field of nothingness, of emptiness, allowing this to be filled with light. Just opening into a vast field of everythingness. Field of peace, of light. Freedom. And just rest here. When you've met and faced your worst fear, and all has fallen away, what remains here? Who are you? When all fears have fallen away and been swept out of the room, what remains? Who are you? What are you? Feel yourself surrendering, dissolving, opening, deepening in this. Who are you? What's here? Just speak that out loud into the room. When all fears have fallen away and been swept away, and you've gotten to the rock bottom, what is it that remains? What is the essence of who you are? What's here? And if people are sharing, I don't know if you're starting to type on Facebook, what's here? When all the fears, when you've met your worst fear and you've surrendered into what's beyond all of that, what does remain? What's here? Who are you? What are you? What is here? Are any people starting to not yet type in?
There's a little delay.
There's always a little delay. Just feel free to type in whatever's here. You can open your eyes into whatever's here. When you've gotten
Unconditional love.
unconditional love, what else?
Atma.
Atma, what else?
Streaming consciousness.
Streaming consciousness, what else?
Clarity.
Clarity. Who are
Light.
you? Light.
Love.
Love.
From powerlessness to beingness,
From powerlessness to beingness,
nothing remains.
nothing remains.
I'm just pure light,
I'm just pure light,
a shining star,
a shining star.
love, light, stillness,
Love, light, stillness,
a large, loving heart,
a large, loving heart.
purpose, light, freedom, love.
Purpose, light, freedom, love. So you're resting in this vast field that is your essence. This is who you are in your deepest self. This is your soul. Now, knowing that you are this essence, I'd like to ask you, if you were to face and clear that worst fear, that rock bottom fear, whatever it was for you, if you were to use a journey process and really finish with that worst fear, turn the page over and write at the top of the page, well, what's the best that could happen? If I clear that worst fear, what is the best that could happen? And if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen, you can also speak this out loud. So I'm just going to ask, let's say that worst fear has been finished, it's been transmuted, it's been obliterated, and you're just resting here as yourself. What is the best that could happen? Start writing it down or speaking it out loud. What is the best that could happen? If you clear and face and finish with your worst fear, what's the best that could happen? Speak it out loud. And if that happened, then what's the best that could happen? Speak that out loud. Write it down. And if that happened, then what's the best that could happen? Speak it out loud and write it down with enthusiasm. And if that happened, then what could happen? Speak it out and write it down. And let's say that happened. Then what would happen? And if that happened, what's the best? What's the absolute best that could happen? Make this a longer and stronger list. And now look at this list, or just know what you've said and ask, does this give me the leverage I need to face down and clear my worst fear with the journey process? Damn right it does. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here had I not been willing to face down and clear my worst fear. And so I really want to encourage you, after this session is over, to download the worksheets, to do that, to get on and subscribe to our website so that you can get a free download of the book, and ask them to give you a download of the emotional journey process, and just do this work. And I think you'll be extraordinarily amazed at how powerfully liberating this work is in a very real way. They wouldn't use it in hospitals, and I wouldn't be working with medical doctors unless they felt this was practical and powerful and liberating work that gets profound results. And so I really want to encourage you to really let your vision for yourself post-lockdown to come to fruition. I could never have known in my innocence that in first facing down that worst fear, that I did not have what it takes to survive, that I would end up with the journey that has touched millions of people's lives and has brought such healing and such peace to so many people. And so I just wanted to ask if there are any other things that people are writing that they would like to share, since we've just done the what's the best that could happen and what is the best that could happen. And obviously, Gabby always says it takes a little bit of a delay until people start typing in. How are you feeling?
I'm healthy. I have my career. I have my love, and I share my happiness all over the world.
So I have my health, my career, my love, and I share my happiness with the world. What else? What are you feeling like right now? Do you have the courage to do the work to clear it and to move forward healthily, wholesomely, freely? What's here?
Content and connected.
Content and connected.
Heaven on earth.
Heaven on earth.
Being true to myself is the lesson.
Being true to myself is the lesson. And I do feel that that is the lesson for all of us, that in this time of uncertainty, the truth is all of our life has always been uncertain. I mean, we don't know. We could walk out in the street and, get bumped off by a bus. We don't know if an earthquake's going to happen, a fire is going to take place, a loved one is going to get an illness, us get an illness. We've never known, but we've lived within an idea that we had certain things within our control. But the truth of the matter is, life has never been in our control. Life does as life does. And so my prayer is that you fall into trust with yourself. Fall into trust with your own heart, that you start learning to listen deeply. Your own being, your own heart is always guiding you. And if you listen not to the mind is full of fear, doubt, judgment. It's spinning all the time, trying to come up with answers. And in my own direct living experience, a true way to live is to live guided by the truth inside you, listening to your own heart. It's so funny in my life when I look back at the times when major disaster has happened, where I found myself at the very bottom of the mountain. I can look up to the top of the mountain and I can see the very moment that I belied truth, that I overrode my own heart, that I listened instead to all my mind talk and took action from fear, instead of listening to a deeper stillness that could have given me wordless guidance. And one of the things I do that's very helpful for me, and I think will be helpful for you during this uncertain time, where we aren't certain about anything really, is that I found a way to listen about what is the appropriate action for me to do in any given moment. And what I do is I always experience that my body is the barometer of my own soul. And so just try a little experiment right now. Let's say there's two different paths that you have to take, where you can do option one or option two, and you don't know which to do, and your mind is going nutso, trying to figure out, should I do option one or should I take option two? And you can't decide, you can't decide, you can't decide. What I do when I have two conflicting options available to me and I don't know what to do, instead of consulting my mind, I go to my body and I close my eyes and I picture option one. And I breathe into the core, the center of my body, and just the front of my body. And if I just feel a sense of neutrality, of peace, of ease of being, to me, that's a green light. I take action, 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 and I don't look back. If, however, in picturing option number one, I tune into my body, which is the barometer for my own soul, and I breathe into it, and I kind of get a glitch or catch or some sort of tightness or holding. I know that that is my body communicating, not now or not that action. And I don't take action. But every time I've overridden that, that's when I find myself at the bottom of the mountain. And I can look back up and see the exact moment I turned my back on truth. I belied what my heart was saying. So why don't you just try it right now? Think of something in your life where there's two options for you available. Now, we're all living in uncertainty. There's two possible options that are coming up in a real way. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture option one. Now breathe into the front of your body and just tune into your body, to the heart, to the core of you, and just check in. If you choose option one, do you get a sense of neutrality, ease, or do you get a glitch, a tightness, a contraction? Check it out. Okay, now let's bring up a picture of option number two, the opposite option, or a different option. Make a picture. Breathe into the front of your body. Do you get a sense of neutrality and ease? Or do you get a glitch or holding or a tightness by taking that option? Okay, opening the eyes. What did the body communicate to you? It may have been that both options weren't right. It may have been that both options gave you a go-ahead. It may have been that one option was a clear go-ahead where the other one was a glitch, or vice versa. And so in this way, staying wide open, surrendered to this moment, you can listen to your heart and let your body communicate the right action for you. Yes, you use your mind to notice what's happening with the body, but instead of consulting endless possibilities, just go into the heart, go into the body, feel what feels the right action for you, and see where that leads you. I've learned over time that in this uncertain world, the only thing I can trust is my own heart. And so I hope that from this session, you've gotten a sense of a way to find clarity in your own actions and moving forward, and also a decision to clear your worst fears and to let yourself be guided by what's right for you in your life, what's clear for you in your life. And so I pray you'll use the link and get the worksheets for this process that I just did, the best worst fear process, and that you'll get onto the website and download the book if you haven't read it yet, and download the emotional journey and physical journey processes. And that if you haven't done all the journey work yet, please, if you can, by hook or by crook, get yourself to the Journey Intensive, that 2-day immersion in grace. Will you learn how to really free and heal your life, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, on all levels of being, in a very real way. And it's a time to invest in yourself. And yes, I pray that we all have learned the lesson from lockdown, that the time that we've invested in ourselves has been time well spent, and that we'll continue to care for ourselves, look after ourselves, listen to our hearts, follow the truth, the guidance of truth. And so I thank you once again with all my heart. And I'm going to do this again next week and the week after, so that we have this way of continuing to clear before we get to the Journey Intensive. And after that, you'll have the chance to go on to the Journey Intensive. So I'll be doing another global gathering next Sunday, same time, same station, and we'll work in a whole different area, depending on what you send to me and say what you'd like to work on. So until then, a heartfelt namaste.